your final video for help. So part 7, you're on your own again. However, you can see that my solution has that code working, so feel free to pause the video and have a look and see if you can get that code. But look at what's changing every time it hits the bat. Is it the X or the Y that's being altered? So let's have a look at part 8, the final piece before you move on to the challenges. So what we want to do is have a variable that's going to keep track of every time you manage to successfully bounce the ball off the bat. Now it is very easy to not miss the bat at this point, and some of the challenges will make it more difficult. You can get the ball to speed up and go faster and faster. So because we're not really use variables too much, we'll see how to do that. Now to make a variable, we should already know, hopefully, because we have two. We want a third variable and we'll just call it score. When you do the next challenge, you can make one called lives. And if you click on them, usually they change. So I'll put lives in the very top corner of the way, and I'll put the score here. Now we've got to think, when the game begins, we shouldn't have any score. So we can throw a set in really to any of the when start click buttons. We want to set the score to 0. And still thinking about when we actually score, I'm just going to right click and clean up code so it's a little easier. Let's move this one back down. We need to think about when we actually score a point. Now we could make a new one of these. However, if we look at the code that I've moved down, every time it hits that player bat, we need to get an extra point. So we can use the change option from in data, and we can change the score by 1. Now hopefully you're thinking about the floor and what your lives changes by, but let's just test that that works. That if we run it, we can see my score increasing here. Now admittedly it's very boring, and there's lots we could do to make it get more and more difficult. For example, getting the ball to speed up every time it hits the bat. If we times it by -1.5, every time the ball hits off the bat, it will get faster. Now there is a limit to how fast it should go before it just has glitches. You can see it getting very fast now, and you see it very quickly is broken. So sometimes changing the speed's not always the best thing to do, because any faster than a certain number of pixels per second for our speed is just going to ruin it. So it'd be best making it more difficult in other ways, like shrinking the size of the bat every time you score a point. So we could do that. We could use the looks option, and we could, every time you change the score, change it by -5. Now I'm just experimenting here with the numbers to see what happens. So we'll see, hopefully it start to shrink. Hopefully we use the correct sprite. And it doesn't appear to be getting smaller, so I'm going to put the number up to 50 and see what happens. And the problem there is one of the problems that I was telling other people off for, is not to put the code on the ball, because it's the bat that we want to shrink. So I will do it one way, and what I'll do is I'll make a new broadcast so that the ball can tell the bat that it's hit it. So we'll call this shrink, and I will try spelling it correctly. Which means if we go to the bat, we can add code in that basically just says when I receive the message shrink, you can go to looks and change size by -10. So let's try that. We can experiment to get the best number to see what works. Now the problem is I've shrunk my ball. Now I can put that back to 100% if I go back to the ball sprite and set size to 100%. You can make the ball smaller too if you like. I mean, it will be more difficult. So hopefully when I click start, this goes back to 0, the ball goes back to normal size, and every time we hit, you can see that that message I've chosen to send is not perfect. Now that's the whole idea behind this. We've got to experiment and see what works. Now the problem seems to be because the ball was touching the bat for a long time, so we need to look and see why it did that. But again, there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. This was just an experiment. I hadn't thought through how to get it working. It was just to try and make it more difficult. Okay, so any features you can add are perfect. So try the challenges and see how you get on.